Welcome to this lesson titled Azure and Entra ID White Box Methodology. During this lesson, we are going to check the steps of how to perform a security review of an Azure and Entra ID environment, having been granted read access over them. With all the knowledge you have gathered so far in this certification, this lesson will help you to understand how to perform a proper and complete security review of an Azure and Entra ID environment, which should help you a lot in the future when you will be asked to do so for an organization. Moreover, at the end of the lesson, we will show you how to launch some automatic tools to perform some parts of this methodology. I hope you learn a lot and enjoy the lesson. Okay, so before starting with the methodology, allow me to indicate how important this lesson is. If you want to become an Azure security expert, you must know how to secure your Azure resources, but also how to find all the misconfigurations as soon as possible. So far, you have learned how several Azure services work and how it is possible to misconfigure and attack them. Now it's time to learn how to find all those misconfigurations in an organized but quick way. This methodology will be very useful to you whenever in your job as a pen tester, Azure administrator, or security engineer in an organization, you need to find misconfigurations in Azure and Entra ID resources. Moreover, during this lesson, we will be explaining the methodology and then showing how to launch some useful automatic tools to perform some parts of the methodology automatically, of course. This way you will be able to understand how the tools work and how to use them in your daily job. So let's get started with the methodology. The starting point of this white box methodology is very basic. Imagine that you need to do an audit of at least one Entra ID tenant and one Azure subscription, and the client or the organization you are working for is very interested in finding as many misconfigurations as possible in order to fix them. So first of all, you have asked and you have been granted the role Global Reader in Entra ID and the role Reader over the subscription. Note that the Reader role might not be enough to read everything you might need, but it's a very good starting point in any kind of organization. So if you can ask for this role, you should be able to read almost all or all inside the organization, inside the Azure subscription. And if at some point you need some further roles in order to get access to some specific information, you could ask for them. Another option is to ask for the security reader role instead of the reader role if the client complains, because the reader role might have too many permissions for read. However, notice that asking for the security reader role instead of the reader one increases the possibility of the pen tester of yourself asking for more roles later, because it might not have enough permissions to read everything you need to read in order to find all the misconfigurations. Of course, in order to find the misconfigurations, you need as much read permission as possible, because you want to check all the configurations of all the services and all the resources that are being used inside the subscription. Okay, and finally, you probably know nothing about the environment. We are going to suppose that we are starting a check inside an Azure and Entra ID environment where we don't know nothing about it, and we will need to find a way to learn about it ourselves. Okay, so what are we going to be checking during this white box methodology? We are going to be starting doing some benchmark checks with the goal of getting some low-hanging fruits and learning about the environment. Then we are going to be moving on to the service enumeration phase, where we are going to be checking automatically and manually all the services that are being used inside the Entra ID and inside Azure, with the goal of finding as many misconfigurations as possible. Then we are going to be checking the exposed assets in order to figure out if we are only exposing in these environments what needs to be exposed, or if we are exposing too many assets and things that shouldn't be exposed to the internet in order to prevent this kind of leaks and potential full holes. Then we will advance and check the permissions and accesses of all the principals inside the Entra ID. We are going to be checking that the least privilege principle is respected, and if not, we will recommend to remove some permissions for the people that doesn't need them. Finally, we will also check external integrations just to make sure we are not giving too many permissions to external platforms and that these are configured correctly. At the end of this methodology, you should have a complete understanding of how the Azure environment and Entra ID are working, all the permissions they have, all the assets they are exposing, and all the misconfigurations that they had that should be fixed. Moving on, let's start taking a deeper look on each step of the methodology. The first step is called benchmark checks. So initially, we usually don't have information about the Azure environment. So running this kind of checks automatically gives us information about what is happening in the accounts and to find low-hanging fruits. So running these checks is going to be allowing us to understand better the Entra ID and Azure environments in a quick and fast way. These are checks such as the Azure best practices, CIS benchmark, and custom checks for the automatic tools we are going to be launching. The good thing about this part is that it can be run automatically. However, if it's the first time you are doing this, I recommend you doing the CIS benchmark, downloading the PDF, and going through it manually at least a couple of times. This will be a very teachable moment because you will be understanding all the configurations that you should be checking, why you should be checking them, and actually how to check them from the CLI and also from the Azure portal. So my recommendation is that if it's the first time you are looking for misconfigurations in an Azure environment, just do these benchmarks manually a couple of times just to learn how to do them. And then we have some interesting list of tools here that are going to be able to run several different benchmarks. We have some modules of SteamPipe. We have the tool Azure MG Subgovernance Reporting. We have Prowler, Cloud Exploit, Skyar, CloudFox, Cloud Suite, and there are a bunch of other tools that could be useful for this. However, I think these are the best tools at this point in time. So remember that the goal of this phase is to learn as fast as possible the Azure services that are being used, the Entra ID configurations, and the low-hanging fruits. And this is in order for you to understand the Azure environment you're checking and start discovering the things that needs to be fixed. And moving on to the second step, this is called service enumeration. So in the previous step, you should have found most of the services and regions that are being used. And now you should be familiar with most or all of the Azure resources you need to check. To confirm you found all the services, you can go, for example, to cost analysis space inside the cost management section and check the services. The goal is to make sure we have discovered all the resources, all the services that are being used inside the Azure subscription or subscriptions we are checking. Once confirmed the use services and regions and having found the low-hanging fruits, it is time to check the service manually, let what they are used for, how are they connected between them, and of course confirm the previous findings. If a finding is given by an automatic tool, you should be confirming it before sending it to be fixed. Some organizations will be using Azure services you are not familiar with. This is usually a great opportunity to spend a few hours learning about them. You could have an Azure account where you can do your own test, and then you could create some resources inside this service you have never seen and learn how it works and how to attack it and which permissions are privileged or not. Basically, what you have been learning during this course, you should be doing it over the new services you don't know nothing about in order to understand how they work, how to attack them again, and, well, how to suggest the better fixes to the client. And maybe you can also send pull requests to HackTricks Cloud if you learn anything new in these new services. This step, this specific service enumeration step, also applies to Entra ID. You should be checking users and groups configurations, applications created and used, and any other relevant configuration inside the tenant. The previous step probably highlighted some things to check already, so you could start checking those ones. So the goal of this phase is to actually confirm that we have discovered everything we need to check and to learn perfectly how all the resources are connected between them, to confirm all the low-hanging fruits we found in the previous step, and to check manually all the configurations inside the Azure subscriptions and Entra ID tenant with the goal of finding more misconfigurations that the automatic tools might not have discovered. Also, we want to understand the logic of why all the resources are being used, how they're connected between them, because knowing this better, we can create some kind of architecture diagram and maybe try to find issues in the whole diagram of how the Azure resources are being used instead of just focusing on one specific resource. Remember that you are not an automatic tool, you are a security engineer, and therefore you should be able to understand perfectly how the environment is working, how the context is working, and also find potential issues in that architecture, in that context. Okay, and for the following demo, we are going to be checking the Prowler tool. So Prowler is an open cloud security tool for AWS, Azure, GCP, and Kubernetes. It helps for continuous monitoring, security assessments and audits, incident response, compliance, hardening, and forensic readiness. And it actually includes a lot of different benchmarks that are not going to be written, but you can see that it is going to be able to test your configurations inside your AWS, Azure, GCP, and Kubernetes environments against all these benchmarks and indicate you what you could be improving. So basically, Prowler is going to be an automatic tool that is going to be able to extract all the data from your cloud accounts and indicate what could be improved, well, so the organization can improve it. It has two different versions, to say so. It has the Prowler application, which is a graphical interface where we are going to be able to see all the data, and it also has the CLI, where we can use in order to get the data in tables or in JSON format or in the format that you prefer. We are going to be checking both of them today. So now let's start downloading the Docker Compose of Prowler. Inside this Docker Compose, I will need to do a quick change. So let me search for it. Okay. I need to search all the N file, and I don't know if this is because I'm using an old version of Composer or something, but it doesn't support that configuration, and I just need to change it so the N file is just receiving as a string the .n file in order to use this one whenever it's deployed. Okay, after having done this change, now I can also download the .n environment variables from the repository of Prowler, and we could start running. So with Docker Compose app, it is going to be loading the Docker Compose YAML file that we just modified a minute ago, and now it's going to be starting all of this. And once it's running, I will show you. Okay, so Prowler is already running, so we can go to the website, to the port 3000, and just take a look to Prowler. First of all, you will be needing to create an account. So let's create a new account. Let's call this admin training at HackTricks.xyz, and we set some password here, and we sign up. As far as I know, there are no default credentials, so you will be needing to create an account. In any case, you can just access the page and create an account, so not a problem. And now we call it this one training. Okay. So in Prowler, we are going to be able to configure some credentials in order to access Azure and get information from Azure. That's absolutely what we are going to be doing. We will be preparing the application Prowler is going to be accessing and giving it permissions, and then launching the scan. So now that we are here, you can see that we basically don't have any information because we haven't launched any scan yet. But you can see here that there are a lot of different tabs in order to check for information that could be gathered using Prowler. So let's launch our first scan. We need to configure something, so let's configure Microsoft Azure. First, we have to indicate our subscription ID. So let's come here, Azure subscriptions. We are going to be launching it against this specific subscription. So let's call this training demo. Now we need to indicate the client ID, client secret, and tenant ID of the service principal we are going to be using. So we can go to Entra ID. We can check applications, all the applications. We want to use the delete me one. We can see the client ID here. Now we need to generate a client secret. So client certificates secrets, client secret. Let's add a new one. Let's call this Prowler. Expires. We can reduce this, although I'm going to be deleting this application after this demo. We need to copy the value of the secret. And now we need to indicate the tenant ID also. So we go to overview, and here the direct tenant ID. We have the ID we are looking for. We click on next. And now everything is ready. No, not everything is ready. We still need to give enough permissions to this application. So let's go to roles and administrators. We want to cloud administrator. These are not the roles we want to give. We want to give it a global reader. So we need to go, okay, let's go back here. Let's go and check the roles. Roles administrators. The custom role, no. We want to check for the global reader. Add assignments. Select a member. We indicate the application. Okay, settings. We want it to be constantly active. Okay, we assign it. Let's give it a couple of seconds. You can see that this global reader permission has also been given over this user. And finally it worked. We managed to give this permission to the delete me application. Let's refresh to be sure. Okay, so now we can go back to Prowler and launch the scan. And Prowler is going to be running all those benchmarks and, well, getting all the information from Azure resources and so on, and showing us the results in some minutes. Of course, these scans are going to be taking some minutes, so we will be leaving this running. Schedule, daily schedule scan, executing. Okay, it's running. So yeah, let's leave it here and come back whenever this is finished. Okay, so we managed to get all the results from Prowler, and we got 57 findings here. We can see the latest of filing findings. We are inside the overview tab here. And in order to check these findings, we could start with the cloud misconfigurations. Here we can see, for example, ensure that multi-factor auth status is enabled for all non-previous users. We should be having multi-factor authentication. Ensure that Microsoft Defender for IoT Hub is set to on. Multi-factor. Okay. What else do we have? Ensure that user consent for applications is set to allow for verified publishers. And also, where is it? Ensure user consent for applications is set to do not allow user consent. This basically means that we are failing both. So we are allowing to consent any application. So it is telling us to not do so. Enable role-based access control for Azure Key Vault. Well, you can see that Prowler basically was able to find a lot of low-hanging fruits, a lot of misconfigurations that we could report to the client, to the organization in order for them to fix. My recommendation again is that you also check manually all these findings, or at least most of them, before sending them to the organization, because you don't want to send fake, you don't want to send false positive. And also, well, notice that Prowler is, and every other tool is going to be limited at this point in time in the services and check it can run. So never forget to do your own checks manually, check all the services they are using, and also check if there was any service an Azure environment is using that Prowler or any automatic tool didn't detect. So you will need to check it manually.